Sometimes what rewrites history isn't some new theory or a complicated idea. Sometimes it's something way more concrete. It's a single skeleton that tells us everything we thought we knew was just plain wrong. Today, we're going to dig into the story of one dinosaur that did exactly that, and in the process, it completely redrew the map of its entire ancient world. Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story starts here, in the vast ancient landscapes of Patagonia, but not the one we know today. We're going way back to the Middle Jurassic, about 170 million years ago. The world is basically one giant supercontinent, Pangaea, and dinosaurs are really starting to hit their stride. And it's right here in 2009 that paleontologists find something absolutely remarkable. I'm not talking about a tooth or a bone fragment. They found an almost complete skeleton of a large meat-eating dinosaur. I mean, a fossil this intact, that's like hitting the paleontological jackpot. Now, the team knew they had a new species on their hands, but what they didn't know was that figuring out what it was, well, it was about to blow a 40-million-year-old hole right through the dinosaur family tree and force us to totally rethink the map of the ancient world.
So the investigation kicks off with the most basic question you can ask. What is this thing? To solve this whole mystery, first they had to give it a name and a family.
Well, it turns out it belonged to a group called the Abelisaurids. And if you're picturing a T-Rex, think again. These guys were their wonderfully weird southern cousins. The source material describes them as bizarre, and believe me, that's putting it mildly. Now, this slide breaks down their two most, let's call them infamous features. First, they had these weird skulls, really short and tall, almost like a bulldog. And second, their arms. Oh boy, their arms. Look, you think T-Rex had tiny arms? You haven't seen anything yet. Abelisaurid arms were so ridiculously small, they were basically useless evolutionary leftovers. And you might actually know some of its famous relatives, even if you don't realize it. The big one, of course, is Carnotaurus, the horned predator from the late Cretaceous, a total dinosaur celebrity. So our new fossil was definitely part of this very strange, very successful family. Okay, but here is where the story takes a massive turn. Because the real shocker wasn't what this dinosaur was, it was when it was from. See, up until this point, the science was pretty settled. The Abelisaurid family album, so to speak, it started in the Cretaceous period. All the fossils we had, from Carnotaurus to all its cousins, were from this later chapter in the age of dinosaurs. This new dinosaur, which they called Abelisaurid, meaning dawn abelisaur, was from the Middle Jurassic. That's, get this, over 40 million years older than the next oldest one we'd ever found. Finding this was seriously like finding a photograph of your great-great-grandmother taken 40 years before anyone thought cameras were even invented. It shouldn't exist. It completely shattered the timeline. So what this discovery did was create this huge 40-million-year gap in the fossil record. We call this a ghost lineage. Abelisaurid proves the family was alive and well in the Jurassic, but then for the next 40 million years, poof! They're basically ghosts in the fossil record. There's this whole secret history of these dinosaurs that we're just now starting to piece together. But Abelisaurid didn't just smash the timeline to pieces. It also started to solve one of the family's biggest and, honestly, weirdest mysteries. Those arms. I mean, it's a real head-scratcher, right? For a massive, fearsome predator, having arms this small seems like a huge disadvantage. So how and why did they evolve to be so totally useless? What was the process? And this is the incredible part. Abelisaurid gives us the first piece of the puzzle. Its fossil actually captures an early stage in this shrinking process. See, its upper arm is still relatively normal-sized, but the hands and fingers, they're already getting short and stocky. This is huge. It tells us the arms shrank in a very specific order, from the outside in. First the hands shrink, then, millions of years later, the forearm shortens. And finally, you get to guys like Carnotaurus, where the upper arm is just this tiny little nub. It's a perfect snapshot of evolution, step by step. But we're not done, because the impact of this one skeleton, it gets even bigger. It doesn't just reshape a family tree, it helps us redraw the map of the entire Jurassic world. So here's the last big piece of the puzzle. Abelisaurid lived back when the Earth was one giant supercontinent, Pangaea. So, in theory, these dinosaurs should have been able to walk pretty much anywhere, right?
So why do we only find their fossils in the southern continents? South America, Africa, India? What gives?
This is a massive problem for scientists. What we expected to find was a global family of dinosaurs, but what the rocks actually show us is a family that was totally stuck in the south.
Finding an early Abelisaurid like Abelisauris in the south really backs up this one fascinating idea. What if the thing keeping them in the south wasn't an ocean? Remember, the continents were still connected. What if it was something else entirely? A barrier we couldn't see on a normal map. And that barrier, it's believed, wasn't water. It was a desert. And not just any desert. A massive, brutally hot and dry wasteland that stretched right across the middle of Pangaea. It was so huge and so harsh that it acted like a climatic wall, literally splitting the world in two. The Abelisaurids evolved in the south, and they simply couldn't get past it.
And that, right there, is the incredible legacy of this one dinosaur. One single skeleton. It pushed back a family's history by 40 million years, it solved the riddle of their bizarre shrinking arms, and it gave us hard evidence for a lost desert that literally shaped life across the whole planet. Just wow. It's just an incredible reminder, isn't it, that our planet's history is still being written, or I guess unearthed. It really makes you wonder, if one fossil can completely change the story, what other mind-blowing secrets are still out there, just waiting for us to find them?